just a concrete culvert at the side of the road. One of those structures along Highway 401 that motorists pass all the time without even recognizing them. But on February 12, 2017, that culvert changed Ashlyn Krell's life. Ashlyn, a 28-year-old London woman, was driving home from Waterloo after visiting some family. She hit some ice on a very cold and very stormy night along that stretch of the highway near London. Her car, a blue Toyota Corolla, went down the ditch and hit that culvert. After that violent collision, it flipped. And beside that culvert, in a hole that was dug for the construction, was 5 feet of runoff water. Ashlyn was under the water for at least 27 minutes before the first responders got her out. By all accounts, she should be dead, but she's alive. This is the story of what happened, about the heroics of civilians, police officers, paramedics, firefighters, a tow truck operator, all those people who converged that night at that little spot near Veterans Memorial Parkway. Earlier that night, when the weather turned bad, OPP Constable Peter Wrenches was expecting the worst.
And we were getting into the shift. I think we were getting close to 9 o'clock. And, but right around 7:30, the rain had stopped and it got cold. And then everything froze.
You could easily skate on it. And there were several times when I got out of the car and I just put my foot on the ground and it felt like I was gonna go. Like as soon as you put your foot on the pavement, it was just like a sheet of ice.
There was only one other driver in the area where Ashlyn went off the road. Western University student Tim Wickers was returning home from his girlfriend's place in Richmond Hill.
I would say she was probably driving in the left lane, and then a car, basically going at a 45-degree angle caught my eye. I looked up and I saw this car going into the ditch. I kind of collected myself there for a second, pulled over, called the OPP. I ran down into the ditch, just shouting, everything's going to be okay.
Meanwhile, OPP Constable Wrenches was only about a kilometer away, helping another motorist when the call came in about a possible rollover.
Call came in, I go zooming down, lights and sirens, and I'm driving up and it's pitch black, it's really dark, and I just see the witness out of the corner of my eye.
I was standing at the side of the road at this point with my phone in my hand, trying to wave. I was kind of using my phone as a light.
And I hit the brakes and I actually slid by him about 100 yards and I had to back up. So I backed up and he's calmly standing on the side of the road. So I said something ridiculous to him, like, how's it going? And he said, good. And I said, where's the car? Because I couldn't see it, couldn't see anything. And he said, just like this, he went, it's over there. I saw those headlights under the murky water and they were just faint. And so I turned to the witness and I said, where are the people? And he says, I don't know. And I said, did you see this thing go in? He says, yeah. I said, did you lose sight of it? He goes, no. And then I said, well, they're in there. And I might have used some expletives.
His instinct was immediately call for help, more help, call for an ambulance, call for the fire department.
First thing I said was, there's tows everywhere. Tell them to drop what they're doing and get here and send them. I said, send a couple, send whatever. And then I said, I need this, send everyone. And that's the last transmission I made because I threw my body armor off because I knew I was going for a swim.
When Pete gets excited, Pete, like I said, has got a lot of experience and he served overseas. He's been a police officer for such a long time that when he says something's going on, you know that something's going on. You need to get there as soon as possible.
I was elevated. I was almost panicky because I knew we had a situation here. I knew we had to help. And I had recently had one similar. And it's that feeling of helplessness.
So the first thing I believe he did was went into his trunk, pulled out a flare. I remember the flare specifically. Rips them open, I think, with his mouth and then throws them on the highway.
So I threw them and they slid like curling, and because I had one in sort of all the different ranges, and then I think one went under somebody's car.
I see Pete standing beside his SUV, and I didn't realize it till after, but he didn't have his vest on. He hadn't taken his vest off. And he's lighting flares like a madman, and he's just throwing them down the highway, and they're skidding because there's all ice. I don't know what's going on at this point. I just get out of my car, like I said, I put my foot down, and I almost slip and fall because it's so slippery. So I kind of literally slide my way onto the gravel shoulder, and I see Pete, and he's like, there's the car. And you're looking at it, and you see a car in the ditch, you see 4 tires, and just maybe a few inches of metal, and the rest is submerged underwater. So, I mean, there's definitely somebody under there. I mean, the passerby, the witness said, yeah, he saw the car, it's there, and didn't see anybody leave the car. So there's somebody in that car, at least one person. So immediately I just jump in the water, not knowing how deep it was. It was about chest high, and it's cold. I mean, it's winter.
So I'm banging on the vehicle. I couldn't breach it. So then I started banging on it just to let them know help's on the way. Just to let them know, whoever's in there, that they're not gonna be, that help is there, to have a little bit of hope. And if they weren't gonna make it, that at least they knew they'd been found. Because you know what? We would have found them in the spring, the way that was going, if no one had seen that. So I was just trying to let them know, bang, bang, bang. And I was trying to peel the door, but I just couldn't get in.
So when I got on scene, came to a stop, and then, I'm yelling for them, and then Pete just starts yelling for me. He says, I need you down here. And so I got there. Pete's already down in there with basically a pry bar out of the trunk. And, he's saying he can't get in the car. It's pinned up against the, I believe it was a steel culvert. At that point, it was flipped upside down and then pinned against a steel culvert. So we really only had one door to access. So, he's telling me, bring anything you got. So I grabbed a fire axe out of the trunk of the car and down in there with those guys. And really, it was a helpless feeling. It's the only way I can describe it. It was helpless. It was very quiet. You knew there were people in the car. We didn't know how many people were in there. It's fully submerged. And I just remember the quiet, so to stand around and do nothing couldn't happen. So I just started chopping through the car, through the rocker panel, trying to access the bottom of the door because Pete couldn't get his pry bar in there.
He's going with this axe right behind me, and I can see sparks. Every time he hits with the axe, there's sparks flying off the axe in the car.
They were trying to reach inside to see what they could feel. And then they also went around to the other side.
I peel the door down.
So it's like from the window down, like kind of.
No, it's from the bottom.
Because it's upside down.
It's upside down. So I was able to peel the door down, and if we could find the car, you probably see my hand marks in it. I peeled the door down, downwards.
And it's upside down, like your hands
It's
are
upside
in the
down.
water, and you're
Yeah.
peeling down.
Yeah, I'm peeling down and I'm doing this, like I'm opening a giant can of tuna. And that's when I got her foot. And I've got her foot there, and it's a girl's foot. And she still had her shoe on. She had one of her shoes on.
You said it was a gray boot.
Yeah, it was a little gray woman's booty, like a suede booty. Yeah. So, and I remember going, oh, and I thought she was the passenger. And then I thought, oh my God, who's in the back seat? Is this a family? And, but anyway, so I'm grabbing that, and then I'm telling everybody, I'm saying there's at least two, I've got a passenger here.
There's a point where I'm pulling at nothing, and it's frustrating because someone's in there, you can't do anything. And I remember Pete just kind of, both of us kind of breathed kind of like a weird, like, frustration, a sigh of frustration, because someone's in there, you want to do something, like whatever you can, but you just can't. There's nothing like at this point, you tried everything you can do, and you can't, physically with your capability, you can't do anything.
There's a time when it's over, and it's about 5 minutes, right? 3 to 5 minutes, and at 5 minutes, they're gone. And I knew 5 minutes had passed, and I think that's what it was. We looked at each other, and I didn't say anything, but to me, it was like, this is, we're in trouble here. This is good. This is bad. And it's a matter then of how many are in there. how old are they and who's, what's going to happen next. And we don't quit. You don't get paid to quit. But in my mind, I thought this rescue is in big trouble now. We've done what we can do, and maybe there was nothing we could ever do. It was bad.
Constables Wrenches and Hadar were in the water. Sergeant Graham was on top of the car with a fireman's axe. They were desperate to get into the car, even using their bare hands to pull the metal away from the frame. By now, other police officers, paramedics, firefighters, and a tow truck were on their way.
I remember seeing Perry standing on top of the roof of the car with the axe, and I'll try and watch my language here, but if you imagine the scenario, three of the largest people and strongest people I know is in the car, Perry, Emad, and Wrenches, and they can't get into it. And it's like...
It's frustrating.
For me, I'm just sitting there thinking, not being disrespectful, I'm thinking, right, okay, so working hard isn't working. We have to start working smart and think, how do we do this?
First responders were by now gathered at the top of the ditch. Even the most experienced among them were astonished by what they saw.
The water is right up to the floorboards of the car. The proximity to the cement and the dirt, you're in amazement for a first second, how did this happen right off the bat? How did this happen?
I just remember thinking, how is there a car upside down in this perfectly fit little spot? And you saw it. It was inches, either way.
When I pulled up right behind Callum, again, I slid almost into his cruiser. I ran down with my flashlight to Perry in the ditch and tried to, what can I do type thing. And I think that's when Callum asked me to go shut the highway down. So I ran right back up to my cruiser, popped the trunk, and started grabbing flares out. Actually, I ran out into traffic and stopped them with my hands first and got...
Good Lord.
There wasn't much we could do in the position it was in other than attempt to open the car. I don't think we had any ability of getting whoever was in out at that point in time, but we knew a wrecker was coming.
Yeah, so anyway, the tow guy goes, they're doing their hookup, the fire guys are there, they're putting their jaws of life, and they're trying to breach where I had been, and they realize the same thing. No matter what they do, you can't get in there. There's not enough room on either side.
At some point, it becomes very apparent to me within 1 or 2 seconds that what we need to do is get the car out of the water.
Oh, and again, at that point, we still thought we've got, or at least I thought they've got, 2 occupants, probably kids in the back, and I'm thinking this is going to be a really bad thing.
How long have they been under? 9 minutes, 10 minutes. Okay. And as I stepped off the truck, we have certain protocols that we do, accident scenes, extrications, but they didn't apply to this.
Did they seem to be, seem urgent? Did they seem
Absolutely.
To be,
yeah. Everybody, it was organized chaos.
Yeah.
Is a good way to put it.
Yeah.
One of the officers handed me the flashlight. As soon as I got there, his hands were, you could tell they were beat red and they were cramped. He couldn't even hold on to his own flashlight. But as soon as he gave it to me, he was right back at the vehicle, working away, trying to get the door open again.
We got the stretcher out of the back of the ambulance, and we stayed up on the roadway. And as time went on, I looked at Marco and I said to him, be prepared. In all likelihood, whoever it is that we pull out of this vehicle is going to be without vital signs.
When the tow truck arrived, just painfully slow. Not his fault, but just his equipment only goes at a certain speed. And then when the cable got unwound, it wasn't long enough. And I kind of wondered that when I'm looking at it.
So technically, on the tilts, there's usually not a whole lot of cable, right? Because we're not usually doing that kind of recovery as often as a normal tow truck. So we're limited on cable we have.
So then we start grabbing chains and belts to basically extend the cable, like a kind of band-aid type of rig system to get to the axle.
Once I got my rigging up, it'd come over no problem. It was just a matter of trying to do it slow enough where if there are people in there, nobody's getting more hurt or tossed out. Right? I don't want to have somebody fall out of the car into the water. I don't know where they are in the car. I don't know how many people are in the car. I just know it needs to be a soft landing.
Once the car now comes over and the door just kind of flopped open because we already had that undone while it was underwater.
You got to kind of run your hand down to see where you're cutting. and then you slide your tool into the water,
That-
and then you're trying to cut.
You don't know where she is, right? You don't
No,
know
you're trying to find where she is exactly before you make a cut.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we can't train for that.
When the car kind of flips over, I saw, Ashton laying there, across on the driver's seat, sitting on the driver's seat, lying on the passenger seat, lifeless. Seatbelt on. Yeah, strapped in. That's probably why she stayed in that position.
And so you couldn't see her face because she had her hoodie up, and it was right around her face. And so they get her out of the vehicle, and I'm happy there's only one. And they get her out, they get her on the stretcher, and I actually got to help because the firemen, there's guys in the vehicle, there's guys all over, and they're passing, and that's what we do. And I happened to be at the end of the line, so I put her on the gurney with another guy, and I pulled her hood back. So I took her hood and I pulled it back, and there she was. And you get to see her face for the first time, and her eyes were open. And it's, that dead fish look is what I call it, when you go fishing and you got a fish in your boat, and right in her eyes, they're just fixed, dilated, there's no reaction. I got my big light on, and nothing's happening. And, she's pale as can be, and the lips are blue, and her hair's all wet, and there's like mud on her and whatnot, and I thought, yeah, she's gone. And I remember I said to somebody, she's gone.
And there was froth or foam that seemed to be coming out of her mouth. And again, she was not making any purposeful movements, that's for sure. She wasn't breathing on her own.
Wet, soggy. I know it's a girl. I know she's not old. I know that she's fairly young. And she's somebody's daughter.
Yeah.
So.
I'm a religious person. I believe in God, and I was like, you know what? Everything happens for a reason, and whoever's in that car, their day is today, and that's it. It's done. It's a done deal. They didn't know it waking up this morning, but I know it right now that this person is not here with us anymore.
The fact that we're working on it was good, but the time that she'd been underwater was just, like, in my experience, I just didn't expect. I thought we'd be looking at organ donations or something like that. That's what I thought they would be doing.
Just replaying, the incident over and over in my head. Trying to think if, should I have dove in that water, or, did we do everything that we could have? Because, to be honest, at that point, I was told that, that the person wasn't going to make it. I was told, you need to be prepared, that this is a fatal accident, and the chances of this person surviving, this is very low.
After the heroic efforts of the police officers, the firefighters, and the tow truck operator, Ashlyn was freed from the car. She had been underwater for at least 27 minutes. Now her life was being put in the hands of paramedics and the doctors who would meet her at the doors of the emergency department at Victoria Hospital, the London Health Sciences Centre, which was only about 5 minutes away. Inside the ambulance, frantic efforts were underway to try to find a pulse.
We couldn't get an IV on her because she was so cold, everything's shunting and kind of going to her core.
Our next option is the intraosseous, which is a drill, and you drill into the leg bone and hook up the IV that way.
So as they're doing compressions, there'd be bits of water filling up the back of her throat. And so in one hand, I'm using a laryngoscope blade to keep her tongue out of the way so I can see the cords. And then when I can see the cords, it's now getting flooded with that kind of dirty, murky looking water.
As I was driving, I heard them talking in the back, and I don't know who it was, if it was Marco that was like, I feel a pulse, and I'm trying to concentrate. I've got all these people working very hard in the back of this ambulance doing CPR, and it's slippery roads, so I'm focused on the drive. But of course, like, as soon as I hear that, just this huge sense of relief.
A lot of times the medication we give them can kind of kickstart the heart to beat fairly quickly for a while, but then when it kind of wears away, then the heart stops again. So that's why I said to Marco, be prepared to resume CPR, because it might just be the medication because she'd already been underwater for 27 or 30 minutes, so we're just keeping them prepared.
It took only minutes for the ambulance to arrive from the crash scene to Victoria Hospital, where Dr. Terry Skoritz and the emergency team were waiting for Ashlyn.
So at that point, we take her to the CT scan to get a scan of her head, her neck, her spine, her chest, her abdomen, pelvis, to get a sense of how severely injured she is and what are all the injuries that we're dealing with.
Ashlyn was immediately put on a respirator to help her breathe. She had no brain activity. The doctors found she had multiple fractures in her pelvis.
Quite remarkable that when she did come in, that her heart was relatively stable as far as her blood pressure, which they had regained at the scene or en route, I'm not sure exactly where, I think it was at the scene, had remained quite stable. I've had a few cases of people who've been starved of oxygen, especially young, healthy patients with very healthy hearts, and once they get oxygen back, their heart will respond and start to recover. However, I was quite surprised about her brain function recovery. That was what is quite remarkable in her case. It would be probably very unlikely that I will see another case like this during my career, and that could be true for the London region as far as our trauma team goes.
While the emergency team were trying to stabilize Ashlyn's condition so she could be moved to the ICU, Constable Peter Wrenches and Constable Emad Hayter waited for Ashlyn's husband Braden to arrive at the hospital.
So I go to the hospital and I find Emad. And he's standing at the end of the hallway and he's going through the phone. He says, "Here, look, I found her on Facebook." And
I saw her wedding photos on there, and I saw who she's married to. I mean, that's the thing with Facebook. you can find out a lot on there. You know, so I know who her husband was, I know who her dad was, who her mom was. I actually remember sitting in the ICU, and her husband had written this long, kind of not an article, but like a kind of a blog from years before. I think it was about relationships and love and all this. And just thinking, if I have to call this guy right now, it's gonna be a bad night.
The officer that was in the water was standing outside the room, writing on his notebook. So I stopped to see if he was okay. And then I said, "We got a pulse back," and again, I even warned him that I'm not sure if she'll maintain it, but at least, like, you know, she's got right now, she's breathing on her own.
Well, he tells me we're driving, we're in London at this point, and we give her a shot of, I don't know if it was epinephrine or endorphins or something, and they got a pulse, and I was just floored. I'm like, you got a pulse? Like, he was very faint, but it was there. And so then, now that I look back at triage, I know they're working with somebody now. They're not. There's something to work with.
And then the husband shows up. So there's now the three of us in there. And Emad had he'd gone in or he'd gone somewhere. So only the husband was there when I got there. So I sat him down and I really, you know, I figured it's not my point at that point, but I wanted to prepare him. And I said, "Listen, this is the situation." I said, "I'm not a doctor. I don't know what's going on in there." I said, "They have a pulse." I said, "But you need to prepare yourself. This is very bad." She was underwater for at least 25 minutes, 24, 25 minutes. I said, "I don't know how this is going to work out." I said, "You need to prepare yourself." And he said to me, "I don't want to hear this now." I said, "Excellent." I said, "If you have any other questions you need, here's the thing." And I gave him my card and I said, "This is the process. There's a number on the back and you need this and this is what's going to happen. How can we help you?"
I've given bad news before to different people, and people take it differently. Some people are quiet and kind of are shocked. Some people are overly, you know, saddened on the spot. And it's visible. He was kind of more lethargic in the sense where he was trying to wrap his head around everything that had happened.
And I remember sitting there very, very tired and covered in mud and hair all over and whatever else. And he must have thought, who is this guy? Like, who is this guy? and I'm in TAC gear. And then Emad comes in, and I remember we talked to him for a little bit, and he sat alone for a while trying to make some phone calls. He was trying to make some calls and rally his people, and Emad and I were quietly sitting there, just sort of on the other half. And then Victim Services came in, we introduced them, and then we were gonna leave. It was nearly 4 in the morning. And I remember Emad saying, "I'll pray for you." And he had his hand, and that was a very touching moment for me. That was kind of neat.
Because I knew after he kind of explained to me that what her parents did and how they were a religious family, and you know, they believe in God and all this, and I was like, you know what, I have very strong beliefs as well. And like I said before, you know, everything happens for a reason. I think it was all part of, you know, the will of God. Just, you never know why things happen. And, you know, after looking in hindsight now, you know, everything happens for a reason, you know, and it's just unbelievable.
There's the film The Princess Bride, which I watched recently, and the protagonist, Wesley is his name, and they take him to see a character played by Billy Crystal. They say, well, he's dead, can you help us? And he's like, no, he's mostly dead. And you know, in some respects, we, in the ICU setting and in our contemporary medicine, those lines are blurred extensively with what we do to prolong life and support life. And certainly in the, as soon as her heart began beating again, however, she's alive. But at what cost, or at what price to the rest of the body, is always your question.
Ashlyn Krell was moved from the emergency department into the intensive care unit. She was far from out of the woods, and for the next 12 hours, she would be fighting for her life. Dr. Robert Arnfield led the team that morning that steered Ashlyn through that harrowing first few hours.
We were facing what is commonly known as multi-organ failure, and where multiple, if not all of the body's organs are in some degree of inflammation or distress, and in some cases have competing priorities in what they may need at any given moment, maybe at the expense of other organs. There was no disputing that we were just full court pressed until we couldn't press any further. And she responded and began to have you know, lessening requirements. The intensity of the care was able to be, first it plateaued, and then we started seeing interval small improvements, that we weren't losing ground. We were starting to put the wheels back on the cart sort of very, very slowly.
The first responders who helped save Ashlyn went back to their regular routines. But in the following weeks, news of her recovery began to circulate.
And I get a text that says she's still alive, and I thought, that's remarkable. It's been 8 hours. And then sort of, we keep getting these texts, and still alive. And I thought, okay, you know, they've got her alive, maybe they're gonna do organs or something, I don't know. And then all of a sudden someone said, well, she's gave the thumbs up or smiled or opened her eyes. It was these little pieces. And I thought, that's remarkable. And then somebody said something like she opened her eyes and smiled. And I remember reading the text to my wife in the kitchen saying, I can't believe this. And I stood and stared at it. I read it over 3 times. I thought, there's no way. And it was very heavy. It was a heavy feeling, you know, that emotional, it was wow, this is crazy. And then somebody said, she's got a great sense of humor. She's telling jokes. Like she told a joke, and I thought, there's no way. And I thought, this is people wishful thinking. And then Susie went up and saw her. And it wasn't until I talked to him face to face in the office. He said, yeah, I went up and I talked to her. I said, there's no way. Like I said, no, you spoke to her. Her mouth is moving. He's like, yeah, she was talking to me.
She was in her room with her mom and her sister and her nurse. And the nurse just said, oh, we're getting her straightened out. They were doing something like helping her to the washroom or something. Give us a couple minutes. So I stood in the hallway with this bear in my hand. And the other nurses had heard the story of what's going on. So they started coming up to me and crying that I had brought the bear and I was coming to see her, and they couldn't believe her story. So I'm standing out in the hallway and they're getting emotional around me already. So it was preloading me a little bit to go in the room and meet her for the first time. Well, I walk in the room and it's a beautiful sunny day and she has a view of downtown from her window on the 7th floor. She's sitting in her wheelchair in the corner with her mom, dressed, and welcomes me in. Hi, come on in. So here I am with this teddy bear and I'm dumbfounded for the first time. I put my hand out and I went, I'm glad I get to meet you in person. Yeah. And then we talked for a couple minutes and I actually welled up, and they welled up and I couldn't hold it back anymore because I've only been on 6 years, but my experience was always negative. I never got to speak to somebody afterwards that turned around, like they always died. And I couldn't believe the conversation I had for half an hour with her, that there was no brain damage. There was, like, I was expecting the worst. Going in and her just bright-eyed, you know, smile on her face. I was dumbfounded by the image I had of her at the crash, lifeless, white, to seeing this pink-skinned, vibrant, positive, smiling woman sitting in a wheelchair looking at me like, come on in.
One day you hear she's awake, she's looking around. The next update, she's walking around. You're like, she's walking around. She's dead. She was dead. I saw her. She's dead. Now you're telling me she's walking around? It's unbelievable. And every text, every update you get, and then you get the update, she's leaving the hospital. She's cleared to leave. You're like, this is, and I think it made the bond between the guys who were there like tighter because we kind of rallied around her.
4 weeks after the crash, Ashlyn Krell walked out of the hospital. Her recovery was seen as miraculous. There were a lot of factors at play. The cold water, perhaps the expertise that was at the scene, how quickly they got her to the hospital.
And moreover, some X factor about Ashlyn that we don't understand that has allowed her to survive meaningfully, not just in an organism kind of sort of survival way, but she's intact, as of course we all know.
But the professionals who saved her life say her story will stay with them for the rest of their lives.
This was a long shot. This was beyond a long shot. This was that miraculous, this is like the game's already over. The clock has stopped. There's no time left on the clock, and you're heading to the locker room and somebody says, oh wait, the commissioner of the league called and said they've reviewed a tape, you get another down, but it's going to be 98 yards to the end zone, so if you can wrap it up or you can play the down. And then, oh wait, and it just, by the way, your star player's out, but we'll bring in this guy. And so many things came into place, starting from the roadway. The fact there's a hole that rained all day filled with 4.5 feet of water, which is right in the middle of nowhere, that just happened to be the right size for that car. The time and the place, the weird weather, raining, then flash freeze and cold, and then the layer ice. All these things came to play. And then we get into the save, we'll call it, where you have the witness. And all those things, has a phone, stops, does whatever. I'm close by, whether I made a difference or not, but somebody's close by. All those little pieces came into play. And even then, we did, the recovery from that situation in 22 minutes was really amazing.
There's a lot of emotion. Yeah. A lot of emotion. I mean, this is something that you don't see often. We don't know the outcomes very often, and so to know and then to find out that she's making a recovery, it's something that after years as a paramedic is inspiring, and you can start to wonder, I'm away from my family for long shifts, I'm missing holidays with my family, I'm working, sometimes not getting a break because of how busy it is, and you kind of wonder, well, what am I doing? What am I missing? And then you have a call like this, and it just reminds you of why you do what you do.
This is a redeeming story. We love a story of redemption, and again, back to storytelling. And a story with redemption is those are our favorite movies, those are our favorite songs, those are and there's not as much redemption in first responder world, or even in the ICU, or even in medicine at all. Where things are restored to back to the way they should be. There's always so much loss, and our visions of surgery fixing things and restoring us to a new. Often there's it doesn't always work out that way, and so for something to for all of those pieces to come to conspire, to come together, and to lift the morale of these officers and these medics and and our hospital team.
I'm not a religious person per se, but if someone else can explain to me how she survived, then I'll listen to it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. She came and visited us at the office one day. I'm looking at her and I literally see a miracle in front of me. And I told her the first time I saw her, the first time I met you, you were dead. And now you're standing talking to me. Now, that doesn't happen very often, or ever.
Ashlyn and Braden Krell have been married for 3 years and live in a cozy apartment in East London. On the day of the crash, Ashlyn left their home and headed to Waterloo to visit with her 2 brothers.
Because they are living by themselves at home. So as the older sister, I wanted to check up on them, make sure they're doing okay, cook them a meal. So I remember thinking that, but I don't remember actually driving into town. I do remember stopping at the Lind chocolate shop because it was almost Valentine's Day at that point. So I was picking up some chocolates. That's pretty much the last thing I remember.
Ashlyn has no memory of the crash or the hours before it. But for Braden, the worst hours of his life would begin with a call from his brother-in-law.
Did you hear the news was the first thing he said. And then it was something like, Ashlyn's been in a very bad car accident. They're saying it doesn't look good. She's in the hospital. We're on our way.
During the first hours of Ashlyn's stay at the hospital, Braden had many meetings with doctors. And Braden realized he was facing a life and death decision.
Dr. Fraser, he said, we're going to have to make a choice about how to proceed from this point because it's not looking good for Ashlyn. And it might be time to let her go. I think those were his words, pretty much. And I just kind of saw it for what it was that he was asking me to pull the plug. And it wasn't something I was ready for. I mean, how can you be? On the one hand, we could let her keep fighting and she might make a full recovery and everything would be great. On the other, she might suffer for the rest of her life, you know, and God only knows what kind of condition. You know, brain damage maybe, or anything, right? And I wasn't prepared to let her be in that place for the rest of her life. Dustin speaks up, and he says maybe we should wait for Mom and Dad. And that was my escape. Yeah. You know, for me, that was like, okay, we can do that. We can do that much, you know, like we don't have to make this decision right now.
2 days later, Gordon, Sharon Skopnik, Ashlyn's parents, made their way back from Africa to Victoria Hospital.
I wasn't really handling it well the first 72 hours, and then when Gordon and Sharon showed up, you know, things started to pick up a little bit. When they were still in Uganda, they phoned. The first thing out of Sharon's mouth was, "Is Braden all right?" You know, and that just tells you what kind of people they are.
Ashlyn's memories of that time are very foggy, but she does remember one moment waking up and seeing signs of her family and friends.
And just looking around and thinking, I think I'm in a different place. I don't know where this is. And then I looked over and I saw that there was a poster with my name across the top. Bright pink, lots of photos of everyone that I knew, friends and family, and with things that I liked, like keyboard keys and little cupcakes, because I love baking and stuff like that. And I just looked over and I thought, oh, cool, that's my name. I was like, oh, this must be my room, I guess. I guess I'm supposed to be here for some reason. So then I was just at peace with that and had family around. And to me, that felt like God was bringing people to me. And that was like his way of connecting with me. Because I couldn't somehow make that connection myself. So it was good to have those other people to just show me the love that they had for me. And in that way, I felt God's love to me too.
Even though Ashlyn was showing signs of improvement, there was no guarantee that once she came out of the coma, she would have full brain function. And then one day, Ashlyn spoke her first words.
the moment Ashlyn sees me, her whole face just lights right up. Just this huge smile on her face. And she's starting to go like this, just kind of twitching her head to the side. And I'm like, is that like a new thing? You know, like, what's she doing? And then Sharon's like, I think she wants you to stand beside her. And she's like, this. When Sharon said that, she started shaking her head, nodding her head, and I walked over beside her, and Ashlyn just grabs the pouch on my hoodie and just clings onto it really, really tight. Like she just didn't want me to go anywhere now. The nurse said, maybe we can try getting her to speak.
Oh, yeah.
And this was the first time that this was going to happen. So they put some kind of valve on her trach. It was kind of coming out in like a whisper, kind of a, not quite her voice sort of quality, right? You know, we talked a little bit, and I told her I loved her. And she said, I love you, but it came out kind of funny because of the valve on her trach, and it was like, I love. She takes a deep breath, and she's like, you! And it just comes out in a rush, right? And it was just, that look she gave me when I first walked into the ICU, when her face just lit up, I knew that things would probably be okay because she knew who I was to her. And that was the first real confirmation I had that she knew that I was her husband, you know, and who we were to each other. That really healed a part of my soul that needed to be healed, you know?
Yeah.
Ashlyn has a deep Christian faith, and she has her own feelings as to why she didn't perish that night on the highway.
So to me, it doesn't feel that heavy. But yeah, I understand that idea that, you know, God has a time set aside for everyone when it's a time for them to not be on earth anymore, I believe. And by all rights, according to everything that happens naturally, I should have been gone that night. And yeah, God had other plans to keep me here for whatever reason. And so I just gotta trust that He's gonna lead me to do and be wherever He needs me to be. And I want to do that. That's something that's very important to me because my relationship with Him is really core to who I am and important to me, so.
I think the guy that actually did the best job was the witness. Was it Tim?
Yeah.
Who called it in? Because for him to stop at the side of the 401, which we do not encourage at all for a whole variety of reasons, on dry weather and a sunny day, for him to do what he did on that night in those road conditions.
In the dark.
In the dark.
The police officers, the firefighters, the paramedics, the tow truck driver, all of them contributed to the survival of Ashlyn Krell on that cold night in February. But all of them say that her life wouldn't have been saved had it not been for Tim Wickers, a Western student who stopped at the side of the road after he saw Ashlyn's car go into the ditch.
Weeks later, when we had all this news that she was still alive and was showing signs like that, and I said, does anyone call? And no one had talked to him. So I called him and I said, hey, it's Pete Richards from the thing. And the lady, and he was stunned. I said, does anyone talk to you? He said, no. I said, that lady's still alive. I said, you saved her life.
When we talked to Tim Wickers, we showed him a picture of Ashlyn, and it was the first time he'd ever seen her.
Yeah. It's crazy for me to see her. It's something, yeah. It's great to see her just smiling, you know, just...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.